Right now, there's somewhere around 1 million Democrats running for president, and that number will probably be 2 million by the time this video is done being recorded. And so that creates a huge challenge for candidates. You have to get attention, but attention is harder than ever to get because there's so many different places to watch stuff. There's so much good TV on. I hear Game of Thrones is a thing. And so every candidate is trying to own a little slice of the conversation and say, here's my audition. So on one end of the spectrum, you have Bernie Sanders. Bernie obviously ran in 2016, and so his campaign video has cheering crowds and has all of these issues where he's saying, I've been a leader on this in the last couple of years, so I've really emerged as a leader in the party. And so his argument seems to be, hey, we can pick up where we left off. Beto's video is very retro. It's just the candidate and his wife, and they're on a couch, and they're at home, and they're talking into the camera. There's a sense of saying, well, I'm authentic, I don't have a lot of pretense, I'm not well produced. It's the same as a lot of his Senate campaign was about, I don't run focus groups, I don't poll test everything. So trying to match the message and the messenger is always important, and you see the campaigns trying to figure that out with these videos. And I think Pete Buttigieg is a good example of that. On one hand, he would be a very non-traditional president. He would be one of America's youngest presidents. He would be a millennial president. He would be America's first gay president. He would be America's first president whose government experience is limited to being mayor of a small town. On the other hand, he's running on this idea that he's going to be a very traditional, heartland, shared values kind of candidate and president, and merge those two halves of his candidacy. And so his video does that really well. Something is new about being a mayor and running for president, but there's also something kind of comforting and traditional about the idea of a small-town mayor, because that's a level of government we tend to trust right now as opposed to bigger federal office holders. This is a whole new era where there's all these other production questions other than the words on the page and the words in the speech that are being thought about by the candidates. Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, I think, both use music in a really interesting way. So Kamala has that happy warrior vibe to this campaign video, lots of bright colors.
I was taught that I had a responsibility to be a part of the fight for justice. And that's what I've done my whole life, whether fighting for a real tax cut for the middle class.
And so she has this kind of fun, upbeat music. She's talking about these big serious issues, but there's this sense of here's somebody who's going to fight, but she's going to do it with a smile on her face. And then at the same time, Cory Booker, he has a drum line behind him.
My dad told me, boy, never forget where you came from or how many people had to sacrifice to get you where you are. So over 20 years ago, I moved into the Central Ward of Newark.
So he spends a lot of time talking about Newark. He's clearly hearkening back to his experience as an African American and appealing to that segment of the Democratic electorate. There's this sense of using the music to convey the message, and that's like a whole nother level that campaigns didn't have to think about until fairly recently. Voters are an audience, just like any audience. They want to see things that hold their attention.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.